now we are at the farm Gorland at Bø. Gorland, as you can see from the lake down here, it is said to mean in Sami language a landscape with small lakes and rivers, streams. Here we had Sami families for hundreds of years, back to the 17th century. And one of them was the famous queen of Gorland, who threw a ring into the lake or the stream and said, "I am rich today, and just as certain as I will not have my ring back, I shall never get poor." Next day, she was brought a fish to eat, and in that fish she found her ring. And she died a poor lady. That is the legend. In fact, she didn't die quite poor, but as her industry was in a crisis during the Napoleonic Wars. She had loading boats, so-called yachts, running to Bergen with dried fish. And when Norway was blocked by the British Navy during the Napoleonic War, Norway and Denmark was allies of Napoleon, that traffic halted quite. But she didn't die poor. That was at the beginning of the 19th century, about 1810, 1815. Later, in 1821, another famous lady was born here. She was called Karen Olsdatter, that is the daughter of Ole. She was said to have magical power, and the neighbors feared her quite much. So she is a legendary figure. Regine Norman has written about her, then calling her Finn Jonetta. That is Jonetta, the Finn, the Sami. She was said to be able to take on forms from animals. Once her son, and that is the very person that you have on the picture with the foxes. He was a hunter, a hunting man. And once he came home carrying his gun over his shoulder, she could see a bird, a crow, sitting on the pole of the fence. And he didn't like crows, so he took out his guns and wanted to shoot her. And suddenly the crow called to him, "Oh, Nikolai, you don't want to shoot your mother." That was his mother, Karen, had taken on the form of a crow. And you have the picture of that man. Well, another time, when she got old, she was rather poor. And she was going around on the farms begging. And she wanted to have meat. That was the best. Meat from pigs, from bacon, and from sheep. But people wouldn't give her such luxury. She gave her maybe some bread. And once she said, he was standing, not in this place, but another place. She has been begging a farmer for meat. No. Well, maybe you will be without meat yourself. Up in the hillside, he could see his sheep and cows walking. And she was just looking at them. And suddenly they all started to move in one direction, to a steep place where they will fall off and kill themselves. She didn't say a word, she was just looking at them as she was controlling them and forcing them to go into the downfall, you know. The man, he understood. She had the reputation of being able to use magic, and suddenly he said, no, please stop them, you will have all the meat you want. That is the story. And 10 or 20 years ago, a man phoned me from the south of Norway. He was born here. We drove past the place some minutes ago, called Skorpa. And he said, do you know that the model of Regine Norman's character, Finjonette, is my great-grandmother? On both sides, he said. He was her double great-grandmother. Well, said I, if your great-grandmother is Karen from Gorland, I know. Yes, she is. When I was young, we told all the stories about her. And I had to ask him, did you tell about her to your friends and neighbors? Oh no, we were not allowed to say a word to the neighbors. Just inside the family. So he had heard about it. He had heard about his own grandmother. She was not a witch, but she was had magical powers, and she knew all those things that she could read about Finjonette at Regine Norman. She had heard when he was a child about his own grandmother. One more story about Karen på Gorland, and Regine Norman has it about Finjonette. Once she came into a house and she could see that on the wall they had 12 very nice plates. And she had broken her plate and she was very poor. And she said, I would like to have one of those plates. No. If I break one, you can have one, but not now when I have 12. They should always have 6 or 12 plates and cups and coffee cups and all that. Well, well, maybe they will break rather soon, she said, and she left. Not long after she had gone, all the plates fell down. They slipped from the wall and fell down, and they were all broken. And one that is more dramatic. Once she asked for bacon. No bacon for you. Please go to hell. Oh, maybe you will be free. You will have no bacon yourself. And suddenly, her pig, it was a big sow with a lot of cubs, piglets, following her, coming into the kitchen. And there was an open fire. And she went into the open fire and was burned to death. And the piglets couldn't live. Well, that was why she wouldn't give bacon to Karen of Gorland or Finjonette. They are rather dramatic, aren't they? But this person, she was... now we are talking a little bit about her in her real life, the real Karen of Gorland. When she was married, she had a child. And far out to the north, in the sea, there is a church. This farm and the neighboring farm was not part of Bø in the early 1900s. It was part of the neighboring parish, Øksnes, or Barkestad as it was called. And she had to row for miles over the open sea to get her child baptized. They came into a terrible storm and they almost drowned. Then she got mad and said, I am Karen of Gorland, and I will see to it that we shall never more attend the church at Skogsvær. And then she went to the preacher, and he wrote to the bishop, and the bishop wrote to the church department of Oslo and asked her to put this farm over to Bø. And it was granted, and they changed the borders, and from that day on, 1866, this was Bø and not the neighboring community Øksnes. That is the work of Karen of Gorland. That's a real thing. So she was also in real life. She was very famous. But they found her in 1900. They were what do you call it in English when they count all the people and put it into the books?
Census?
Yes, the census. They had the census. And then she is 80 years old. She is poor. She has. She lives from charity, and she owns only one sheep. It says. So then she was a widow, an old widow, and she died poor. Well, that's the Karen of Jørn. I have no more to say. I rest my case.